or wait? Should we wait for 2:30? Yeah. Oh, really? It was 2:30.
No, still, I said if you would have been late, then we could have shifted it by.
Oh, I'm so sorry for making you here from, because I was upstairs and I felt that it's 2:30. I was okay. Okay, thank you. Just, and I'm so sorry. So the topic of the talk is the understanding the pandemic dynamics through the lens of the human behavior. It's not exactly related to the mathematics for oncology, but I hope that we can find some implications that apply to the mathematics of the oncology. Because I find some similarities between the containment policies that investigated here and the treatment of the cancer and the people response. So we can apply this approach to the treatment modeling. So first I will review the research motivation, and then I will review the behavioral epidemiological framework that's familiar to you. Most of you are familiar with this concept, and we will talk about further about transmission dynamics. That's I expanded SIR model here, and then we will discuss the result, and I hope that we can find some solution for applications. So the main question of this research is that how the interaction of the people response to containment policies and the containment policies affect the dynamics of the dynamics of the pandemic. And also the other question is that how do the people decide to respond to containment policies? You know that how the SIR models applied, and these models are mostly applied to predict the dynamics of the pandemic and different disease, infectious disease, mostly since the COVID-19 as well. It was different version of these models. I mean, the SIR model is a family of models. You are familiar with this concept, susceptible, infectious, and recoverable. So these models and its variations are applied to forecast the disease transmission. And these models are good tools and powerful tools to predict the disease, and also they have good insights for the decision making as well. So, but these models have some simple assumptions, although there are some papers that revised these basic assumptions recently, especially during the COVID-19. They assume that the transmission of the disease between the different compartments is such that the contact rate is stationary and is constant. So, and this theory assumes that people contact each other randomly, like the particles of the perfect gas colliding within the box, and then it will be happen that the disease transmitted from infectious to susceptible people. So, in fact, the limitation or the restriction of this approach is that it ignores the behavior of the individuals. The most important part of the phenomenon that's related to the human being is the human response to any phenomenon. Okay, so and then also the basic versions of the model, these models, they didn't study the government policies, but recently the government policies are integrated. Although some version of the models are applied, for example, for vaccination and studied the long-term of the behavior of some disease, for example, for the vaccination as a policy, but for infectious disease, there are limited number of studies that they have studied the government policies. So bringing these two aspects into the model, we assume that interaction between the containment policies, a set of measures that the government uses to control the disease, and also the people response impacts and determines the outcome of the outbreak over time. And as you know, since the COVID-19, the government's imposed a set of restrictions or policy measures like the school closures, social distancing, workplace closure, and mask wearing, and a set of this that's in different countries, depending on the structure of political structure they could use. And there are some indices that they determine the government policy strange as well, that we use some one of them in this study to calibrate the model as well. So these policies, statistical investigation shows that these policies, in fact, had effective impact on the disease control. But what is important is that how the mechanism can be explained mathematically. Okay, so here I mentioned some empirical studies that some, for example, Anderson and they utilize mobility data to examine the effect of physical distancing and isolation, and showed that the contact rate in British Columbia, in Canada, decreased by. So it means that the government policies had positive impact on the number of contacts. So the decrease in number of contacts resulted in the decrease in the number of infections. So, and also another study here, they use the age stratified models and compartment model to study the transmission of COVID within Ontario under alternative scenarios. And the results also shows that these the policies have a positive impact on the number of contacts. So, as I mentioned, in these models, statistically, we can show that these policies have positive impact on the number of contact and the number of infection. So, but when we release the restrictions or we remove the restrictions, we see that there is a sharp increase in the number of infections, and it happened during the COVID-19. So here, we want to model what is the reason behind of this different behavior. So to have a more realistic perspective on pandemic, we developed a mathematical model that incorporates behavior aspect of the disease into the model. So, as I mentioned, that behavioral epidemiology is not a new since 1990. Some researchers use this approach to study the behavior of the families with respect to the kids' vaccinations in some disease. So it's not new, but also some studies, as I mentioned here, the most pioneering one is Capasso and Serio. It belongs to 1978, that they studied that contact rates are decreasing function of disease prevalence. So, and then the force of infection as well. So it will be a nonlinear procedure. So based on this idea, we developed a framework I will show in the next slide, but first I will mention to the assumptions behind this framework. We assume that the government has, and also the people, they have a set of information to decide. Both the government decides to design and conduct the containment policies, and the people decide to respond to these policies and to disease in general. Okay, so but the government uses in this model that I didn't bring to this slide, but there is a mechanism. It's familiar to your Markov decision process. And we assume that the government has a set of limited number of the actions that can decide, for example, to open or to close, to allow schools to be closed or to be open. So we have a set of actions that the government decides. It's binary decision. So, and then the government optimize or maximize, for example, a utility function or minimize the cost function. In this paper, we assume that it minimizes the cost of the actions. And on the other side, the people respond to these policies. So the people response depends on their risk perception, first of all, and they analyze the costs and benefits of different attitudes to the containment policies. Here we assume that people have two alternatives. The low and high compliance to the policies. So then they will compare the cost of different level of compliance, and then they will decide to switch between different alternatives. So, and here the pandemic outcome depends on the interaction of these policies and response of the people. And then we assume that the set of information, which is a function integration of the number of infectious and also a kernel function, will be updated over time. And then the government revise the policies dynamically, and also the people response will be changed over time. So this framework shows that how the interaction works. As you see, M is a set of information and Z is a set of policies, could be indexed like this model that we assumed, but we can extend it to different policy measures. And the BET is the behavior of the people in response to policies and how the people response and receive, given the set of information will affect to IT is the outbreak outcome. So can you, I don't know what is the problem. The title is not clear. Okay, so as I mentioned, the government and also the people have a set of information. We assume this index for the set of information is the integration of H is an increasing function of I, T minus tau, and the kernel function here, we assume two-scale kernel function because of the information is acquisite, and also and the second is assumed for the fading of the memory. You know that the information is collected regarding the infections. Here we mean the confirmed number of infections. So, and also, as you know, that the people when consider the information, then the recent information has a higher weight in their decisions. So the old information weight in the decision will be much lower. So this is because of that, we assume that we have a two-scale kernel function. The T2 is for fading memory, that it means that the importance of the information will decrease over time, and people use recent information in the decision. So based on that, we can have to this ODE, and we can integrate them into our system of equations. So next step is that to explain how the people behavior is formed. So I call behavior of the individuals. You know that the people response to pandemic generally and policies also can be grouped in two parts. The first part is the natural response, and the other section or the other part of the behavior is imitation behavior. By imitation, I mean that the people, in fact, sample other people. So if we assume that each individual can be at a low or a high level of compliance, so the low level compliant people will sample other people and will switch to the high level if there is a benefit, okay, regarding the cost benefit analysis I will discuss. And also the high level compliance people also will sample other the other people. So the imitation means that the people look at other people. If they, for example, use mask, or they do not go to the workplace, so they close their workplace, they will do the same. Sorry. So this behavior, I call it imitation behavior. So, and also the extent to which the people accept the restriction depends on their perception of the risk. The perception of the risk is important part of this analysis, because when you assume that if you, for example, wear the mask, the risk of infection will decrease, so it affects your behavior. So it can affect the level of compliance to the policies. So, and as at the end, the level of the response of the people to the policies depends on the forces, the natural response and imitation response as well. So here, as I explained, the people will choose between two levels of compliance, and also this I explained. I think there is no need to go further. So here, I assume that the payoff to each level of compliance can be considered as P low is the payoff to the low level of the compliance, which depends on the information set that the people have access to, and also the policies. Z is the policy index. So ML and MH, both of them are the response to the set of information that the people receive. So as you see, the payoff to the higher level of compliance is more expensive, because the higher compliance force you to pay more. For example, the people, if, for example, restrict themselves from going to shopping, so their utility will decrease. And also in terms of you can calculate in terms of monetary costs. And also when they restrict themselves from going to the workplace, so it costs them, okay, in terms of decreasing the wages. As well, if they wanted to wear masks and use some sanitizer and something like that, so it will cost them, okay? So MT is information index that I explained in previous slides. Here I explained that M is the information index that we integrate into our model. Yeah. The information is integration of the H, which is increasing function of the number of infections, I, and also the kernel function that is because of the, the acquisition of the information and the fading information.
Information comes from the government, makes policies.
Yeah, and also the people.
Marketing the policy.
Okay.
So critical individual will say that's what they're saying for their purpose. It's not for my purpose.
Exactly. Here we assume that there is one set of information that's officially published, okay? But the people can receive information from different sources, so we can assume different set of information. So that will be an extension to this model. And we can assume that people have their own set of information, the government has its own set of information, then the decision of government depends on, for example, their own information, and as well the people response depends on the set of information that they receive, for example, from social media and other. But here we assume that the information is those information that officially published. And as I mentioned, by the infections, I mean the confirmed cases. So, and also there is a delay in the confirmed cases because the information should be collected and purified and then published officially. So these are the extension in the model that we can assume as well. So, and I talk about the fading memory and also this mechanism, in fact, modifies the perception of the infection risk, okay, based on the number of cases and the number of cases that publish officially, okay, and I think that there is no need to talk about this slide. I have explained on that previous slide, but let me go to the mechanism that we have. As I mentioned, that we have two levels of compliance and we have two payoff for them for each level, and then delta P is the difference between the low level and high level of compliance. So based on that, the delta P is higher or greater than 0 or less than 0, there will be a switch or between two level of the compliance. So as I mentioned, the people will sample the other groups and then will respond to the policies. So if, for example, delta P is greater than 0, then change in behavior is governed by the equation 8, which shows that the delta is the rate of the sampling of other people. Gamma B is the response. It means that the response is, in fact, the elasticity to the change in the cost or the benefits. Here we mean the payoff. So not all people will respond in the same structure. So this means that when delta P is greater than 0, this equation will derive the change in the behavior. Also, if delta P is less than 0, then the change in the behavior will be will be expressed by the equation number 9 that shows that how the people sample. So as you see that BT is the response to the policy. So 1 minus B means the not to response. Okay, so and we can assume that eta is the average or and also we combine them, then the deriving equation is dB of dt that shows the change of the behavior over time in response to change in the delta P, positive or negative. So it depends. So this is structure.
Differentiate between risk takers and non-risk.
I will talk about the other. This is the imitation part of the behavior. Yeah. But the natural, I call the natural response. The second part is the natural response, that Q is the perception of the risk, that is the probability of decrease in the infection when the people, okay, follow the rules of the policies. So this means a decrease in the number of infections. This perception of the risk, in fact, drives the natural behavior of the people with respect to the policies and the disease. So here we combine. The second part shows the natural or response to in fact, to the disease. So here Q is a driving factor. So, and it also depends on the infection rate and the number of infections. So it will be, it's called natural response. So we can combine them, then we will have this equation that integrates both part, the imitation behavior as well as the natural response to the disease. So here, as you see, the set of information determines and also the policies play a critical role in the behavior and the perception of the risk as well as a critical point.
So people are influenced by number of infected people, or number of people who died.
Oh, this is here we assume that the people decide to respond to the policies based on the risk perception. If, for example, they assume that following the rules will decrease their risk of infection, then they increase the level of the compliance. Okay, So naturally, by regarding of the behavior, regardless of the behavior of the other people. Okay, this is the natural, I call the natural behavior. But
Well, if you die, it's not a matter of behavior, it's a matter of freedom.
yeah, it depends that you're right. Yeah, that's a good question. You know, basically, the severity of you mean the severity of the disease, how much is severe or how much is the probability of death. But here we consider the probability, the decrease in the probability of the infection. But yeah,
Okay, so,
we can assume that as an, you know, as an extension that we can consider this aspect that the people, the probability of death is, you mean that depends on the rate of the death or the probability of death? How?
at some point, the government here said on the radio how many people died today.
But also they
Today.
publish the information about the number of infection. Everything depends
Yeah.
on the number of infection here, not the number of death.
People who are really scared
Death.
by this, they calculate the probability that they will die if they don't
Exactly.
comply. If I can take you further to use a mask or not use it.
Mhm.
So there was a lot of debate and there was a lot of misinformation. Like with Vakter.
Mhm.
Oh, the mask is only protecting other people,
Mhm.
not yourself.
Exactly.
And then some people say the mask is really redundant and
Yeah.
actually blocks your breathing. So the perception now is very difficult to model.
Yeah. In our result, we show that your point is very important because when the people perception is high at the beginning of the pandemic, okay, and they expect that they will be less infected, okay, so the probability of infection be much less, so they will comply more, okay, so but over time their behaviors will change. You know, basically why? Because when the people see that other people are wearing the mask, they say, oh, it's not necessary because they are covering themselves. They wear the mask. So I'm protected because the same that you mentioned, that the misinformation, you call it as a misinformation, but this is again another side of the coin, that the people decide on the perception of this when the others. So we have two parts of the behavior, the natural and imitation. I sample others, and also naturally I decide based on my perception of the disease. So this is a set of the equations that, as you see, this is a an extended version of the SIR model. The first integrates the policy and the behavior into the model as well. And also we have the driving equation and the motion of the behavior. And also the set of information that's here. We have a new, it shows the decrease in the information over time as well. It depends on the behavior of the people as well, and the policy and the response of the people to the policies as well. So here, I didn't mention to how to the decision of the government, but there, as briefly I said that the government decides to set the policies. You know, basically the government receive the information set, okay, and then set a level of the optimum information and then compares it. If the information is greater than that level, so the policy will be conducted, otherwise it will be released. So here, for simplicity, I just assume that the change in the government policy is a function of the set of information. So the gamma Z is in fact the response of the government to that set of information that the government has access to. So another point in this paper is that we assume that theta, the rate of transmission, is a function of a number of contacts. So here we assume an updating function, this algebraic function for the number of contacts. The number of contacts is average number of contacts each age group has with other age groups on average. Okay, so we have a matrix, in fact, that represent the number of contacts of each age group. Here we average because the model is the aggregate model. We can, in fact, stratify the model to different age groups. But here we have updating level of the contact shows that the policies will affect the level of contacts on average. C naught is the number of contact before the pandemic, or initial number of contacts, and Z bar is the maximum level of the policies which converge to 1 or 100 that is represented in two indices, and we normalize that. And also Z0 is the initial level of the policies that the government was witnessing and deciding, collecting the information. And at that time, there was no serious policy conduct. I will show the index for that. And RZ is the rate of decrease in the policy over time. Here, as you see, the contact number Cij is the number of contacts at the house, the school, the workplace, and the last one should be the community. Sorry, that is the community. That was a mistake, number 21. I should correct that. So this is the number of contact at the house, means that how you know the number of contacts at the home, and also school and workplace. So Cij is the average weighted average of the number of contacts in the community. So to track and model the government policies, we applied OX-CGRT, is an index developed by Oxford University. This index shows the weighted average of the different indices. So they assume sub measures for that index, and they calculated the weighted average. Also, we can study also different policy measures because the data is available. So, and also we fit the kernel function. Here, this shows the scattergram between cumulative number of cases and the OX-CGRT, as you see that with increasing the cumulative number of cases, the level of the policies has been increased. The maximum level for the Ontario was 77, I think, as I remember, but it could be maximum 100. It means that everything is closed and the mass gathering is restricted. There is no transaction. There is no, the schools are all closed. Workplaces or unnecessary workplaces are closed. So the first version of the simulation of the model, the system of equation, shows that under two alternative scenarios, we see that the number of infections with the policy regarding in fact, the response of the people, how can affect the peak of the infection number, and also it will postpone the date of the peak as well. So the dashed line shows the infected number with the policy, and the solid red one is the number of infection without the policy. So the policy, integrating the policy and the response of the people into the policy can impact the number of infections over time and the maximum level of the number of infections. Here, we also simulated for different level of the informations. We assume that the initial information level of information plays a critical role in the government decision as I mentioned, how the government decides, and also the individual's response to the policies. So I simulated the model for different level of the information. As you see here, if the initial level of information is low, so there will not be much impact on the maximum number of infections, but it will postpone the peak because there is some information, and it's different from when you have no information about the disease. And if we increase the level of the information, we will see that there will be not only the maximum number of infection will decrease, also it will impact the date of the maximum. And if we increase to M0 to 0.5, then there will be a sharp decrease in the number of infections. So it means that how important is the information in our model.
Curves are quite similar shape, the curves, especially the upper one. So it means that
The solid red is without
there
the,
is some delay between the dash one and the red one.
yeah.
So what about this delay? What's causing this delay?
You know, this is because the people response also depends on the information that they receive and the government decision. As I mentioned, the information should be collected, purified, and then published legally. There is a delay, yeah. So also, the response of the people to policies, the gamma B is the parameter. For different level of the response, we also see that how it affects the number of infections over time, and also the maximum number of the infections. And also, the last simulation is your point that you mentioned, the perception of the risk. Here we simulated for 3 level of Q, the perception of the risk. We assume it's parametric, but it could be modeled as an extension. But here we assume parametric, we assume 3 levels. As you see, the first level of Q is the minimum level. So when we, at the beginning of the pandemic, when the people perception is that, okay, the probability of the infection, decreasing the probability of infection is low, so the response will be much lower. So the level of compliance will be lower, okay? So here, as you see, the first peak will be much higher than the others, okay? So in comparison to other level, and if we compare that when the perception is high, then the level of the compliance will increase and the number of infection will decrease. But over time, there will be a change in the behavior. As you see that, although at the beginning, the people perceive that if they follow and comply with the policies, they will be less impacted. But over time, the imitation behavior will impact. So they will sample other people over time, and they say, okay, other people are, for example, they wearing masks, they close their businesses, they less travel, so they will increase the level of the consumption, the level of the activities. So as you see, the second peak is much higher for the higher level of the risk perception. And it happened during the pandemic, over the pandemic. And
What's so sharp? Because people may be tired of obeying the limitation.
right?
Tired.
Oh, tired, yeah. I get it.
Time, how many,
Okay.
how many days you
Yeah.
want it to be?
But still you see some people are wearing the mask in the street, and you see even they are alone in their car and they are wearing the mask. That is another, yeah. Yeah. This is the perception of the risk, and it shows that how people are risk averse or risk taker. Exactly. Yes.
Great.
The,
This is time snapshots, right?
yeah.
So if you look at the accumulated numbers of infections. You look into that? There's
there sort of a relationship there?
You mean that the accumulated number of infections is the same?
That's what I'm asking.
I didn't calculate it, but I can do it, yeah, with the,
Does it-
yeah.
So just in the eyeball one, the integral over the red and the blue might be about the same, right? The yellow one might be higher. But what I wonder is there a relationship?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, that goes good question. Yes, I will do it to see how is the calculation. Yeah, but it seems that they are not equal.
I wouldn't expect them to be just.
Yeah, which one is much higher? Yeah.
Is there a relationship?
Yeah.
Like, you do this,
Mm-hmm.
You put more Q values in there.
Mhm.
You should not calculate, do you get some order, do you get some monotonicity?
Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, if I, for example, assume a spectrum for Q and then simulate for 100, yeah, or more than, yeah, and then we can figure out the relation between accumulated number and the level of the risk perception.
All these peaks that you see, and the times when they occur, I mean, here it looks like they're monotonic.
The first peak is too close each other. Yeah, the peaks are close to each other, but the level.
Yeah, so I just wonder.
Yeah.
Relationships.
Great, good idea. I will simulate for that. Thank you for this comment. I will simulate for a spectrum of the Q, and then how will be the results, and yeah.
Anything emerges.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
If you want to look at the number of infections, you can just look at the final number of recovery or susceptible, because you have no death in your model. So all the people that are infected eventually become recovered.
Right.
Yeah, that is another version of that, yeah, mentioned to this. Yeah, but I will, this is a good comment to simulate for Q and see how much is the maximum level or the cumulative number of infections for under different level of the risk perception. Okay, thank you. So in conclusion, our study in fact highlights the complex interplay between the policy and also the response to policies. So it means that the government should incorporate the response of the people into the policy, how the people respond, and should be aware of that and consider as well when they set the policy and conduct them. Okay, so but the most important part of this talk could be here, and we can discuss this part. Basically, my idea is that the cancer treatment and also the containment policies have something in common. It could be considered, and my idea is that, and at least my question from you, our group of research, is that can we study this treatment and all the decision on treatment? Because as you know, that the most of the treatment model assume that there is a treatment, and they integrate the treatment in the model and study the treatment on the progression of the cancer or tumor level. But how the treatment is decided, how the provider decide on the treatment. And also another and most important question is that do the people accept or reject, and how do they decide to accept and reject the treatment? My idea is that, first of all, the providers has a set of information. We can formulate the decision by the providers, for example, in Markov decision process, that they decide to conduct or to implement this treatment or not, or a combination of the treatment. As you know, that in some type of cancer, there are a mix of the treatments and that can be applied. And you are more experienced than me. This is an idea that I wanted to share. And
Security, because in infection, the thing that
do you want to use?
I think that he was talking about, like, how much severe a disease is, how much is the probability of death. because cancer, the probability of death increases, it is mostly the decision of the doctor that the patients follow through. Like the say of people in making a decision, I feel is very less because people are not much informed and it's like high risk, it's more severe. So I feel the choice.
Exactly. The level of information set the decision by the provider, okay?
Yeah.
But on the other side, people decide to accept or reject. You mean that they have to accept it
No.
when it is so severe?
No, but it's much more different than respect to the COVID, like rules that we have to follow. There was much more freedom in
Mhm.
that sense, of
Yeah.
accept it or not.
Exactly.
So when we have a cancer, it's less likely that you don't accept treatment that the doctor advised. I mean, if they don't accept, it's just because you've gone through rounds of treatment and you're saying, I can't do it.
But you know, what determines the decision of the people? How do the people decide on that? It is
I mean-
force or not?
Of course, but when it's, I mean,
So the thing
I mean,
is
with
like
information.
how here you can segregate the people based on high compliance or low compliance, based on how people imitate each other versus the normal reaction. In terms of cancer, to decide that it is what we are trying to say is people usually accept what the doctor says. The choice of
Do they
saying-
trust the doctors?
Yes. The,
How did
mean,
you,
obviously
is there
doctors
any
trust the
investigation that shows that 100% people trust the doctors?
Some of them say no because they don't want to go through the treatment because. the
Yeah,
treatment
that
is
exactly,
very
that is the
bad.
what I
They
mentioned.
die anyway, like they know, they accept.
You
they're
know,
gonna die.
exactly. The people know that they will eventually die, but
Yeah.
what is important is
But you
the
can't think-
maximum length of the survival, okay?
Well, but if I don't want
Or-
to go through treatment myself, I decide that I know that I can increase my life of a year, but I don't want to live for a year and they really have treatment. And so I decide, well.
No,
okay,
it's not for a
working.
year, you know, the treatment is not one shot or one time the policy, okay?
They say no are people that they know they have terminal cancer.
yeah.
Just one more thing to add to all of this. I just think that one thing that is very different apart from the discussion
Mhm.
and cancer is contagious. So I mean, it's different. I mean, our reaction as the individual will be different. First of all, because it's not contagious.
You know, basically, when there is an improvement, for example, okay? When there is an improvement, the doctor inform the patient, isn't it? So, and they will follow the doctors, okay, they will be more convenient to accept the treatment for the next step, isn't it? Am I right or not?
Yeah, but I think I would look at it, I mean, I don't know, but my understanding
This
that
is
there are like a really few people that don't follow. Maybe one thing that would be interested in is in terms of prevention.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's what I was
Yeah,
gonna say.
like in terms of modeling prevention and how,
Whether
like
people
information.
change their behavior in response to information about cancer genes and stuff like this.
Yeah, like once you know you have cancer, like there's not many way, like, no, we know that the recovery, like, there's no recovery basically, you just have. What they give you is a probability that you're gonna respond to treatment.
Mhm.
It's not a probability that you're gonna survive.
Yeah.
Like, it's a probability that you're gonna survive if you accept treatment. If you don't accept
I
treatment.
think
it's not.
survival is very less, like, if you look at the survival rates also, it's not
Mhm.
like very encouraging.
Yeah. So like, I think, but in your way, in all of these dynamics, it's a lot about prevention,
Mhm.
maybe. Like, but before, like how much, like going.
The prevention is good idea, but
Like,
I mean the treatment, because I assume that, you know, basically the providers at each level of the cancer, okay, at each state of the cancer, decide to use different treatment packages, isn't?
Yeah,
Do you
they
agree?
give them their standard.
When you talk about providers, you probably also have to talk about healthcare systems,
Mhm.
because not in all healthcare systems is the provider's interest the best interest of the patient.
Mhm.
That provider is, if I'm a company, I have other interests in the patient.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But we can assume there is objective function for the provider as well to maximize the survival period or to minimize the level of the tumor. This is the objective function that we can assume. And the provider, if is in a problem, or this means that to be honest, not to seek the profit. I mean, yeah, you are right. We can consider the health system or the hospital.
If you have a healthcare system that's completely based on financial profit,
Mhm.
maximizing that,
Mhm.
you cannot assume that they're.
Yeah,
completely-
exactly. Exactly. These are the assumptions that we can discuss.
Yeah.
So one point is that regarding the providers, we should assume that the health system or healthcare system, not the individual companies or private companies that they. So the other is that you mentioned that the cancer is not contingent, that, yeah, you mean that either the providers and the people have no choice and they should be treated
I think,
regardless of the level of the cancer.
I think like once, if you start looking at treatment, people do lots of modeling of treatment optimization to reduce side effects, reduce cost. And it's, that's been done. And I'm not sure like the information that the patients have as much influence on their decision, if not that you need to accept their decision. And if I don't want to maximize my life, but I've already gone through lots of treatment and now I want to stop, it's just your decision. But I guess if you look at prevention, then you have lots of misinformation transfer. You have lots, and then you can like still optimize for like at the population scale, which is the type of model that you do. At a population level, you can look at cancer as an epidemic. And you can see how
Exactly.
misinformation in the prevention
Yeah.
or in the can affect the long-term behavior, which is in terms of also policy of the governments, in
Yeah.
terms of spreading information about.
Yeah.
you know,
Exactly. That's a great idea to work on the prevention. Yeah.
Search about SIR models, have they been extended to cancer systems?
Yes.
They're not much because they're mostly used in infectious
Yeah.
or epidemiological problems. But there are like a few papers where
Yeah,
they are
you're
looking
right.
at these SIR models in cancer.
Yeah,
But, very, very minimal.
yeah, I reviewed the literature. There is not too much papers about the epidemiologic approach to the cancer.
But I guess when they do that is because maybe they, yeah.
Why? What
Because
is
it's
the?
not,
Cancer is not an infectious disease.
I
Oh,
mean,
no,
there are-
infectious. I mean, you
there
know,
are some cases in which I think the flu model.
because it's infectious, it's transmitted to the other people. But
Sure,
Yeah, it's like you,
there always some.
there's some cancer that are associated to infectious disease.
yeah, there are some.
But like
Yeah,
at the population scale, prevention and like if people talk about this,
I would agree with that. So behavioral changes.
yeah, exactly.
So,
And the government can do it.
change my lifestyle based on information that I have.
Yeah, exactly.
exactly.
Based on policy that might support this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we can consider those type of cancer that are infectious, like that relate to the sexual relations and those.
It's just like a ovarian cancer,
Yeah.
HPV, we have a vaccine.
Papilloma
People
virus,
have been looking at it.
But do the people accept the vaccine? How do people respond to the vaccine? This is the same that the people, yeah, but the response of people.
Therapy. I mean, if you
Yeah,
put in
exactly,
a way
there's
that
no-
you're modeling the prevention and that is makes sense, but then for any type of virus or cancer, it doesn't have to be a cancer that can be like.
Yeah, that was one topic that we can work on prevention and how does it work and how we can take into account the behavior, the policy, the information and publication of the information. So that's generally, but since it's not infectious disease, we should reconsider or reformulate it. How can we can say the level of the cancer,
Yes. so-
not, yeah.
It's
not-
progression.
yeah, in the society. So then we can integrate the behavior and the policy. Yeah, exactly. Thank you for this point. The next is that we can focus on those type of cancer that are somehow infectious. In that case, your comment is that the vaccine,
Like, I mean, the only one I know, but there might be others, is HPV, but then you have to model the actual virus.
okay,
And then there's like, also the probability that you.
Vaccine doesn't cure what you have, it just prevents.
It's about
Yeah,
getting,
yeah,
yeah,
it's a
yeah, yeah.
reaction.
Get it before
That's
you
what I'm
got the
saying.
thing and you know.
Yeah,
you
yeah,
have
very
vaccine.
awesome, yeah. But that's why.
so but the effectiveness of the vaccines are important and the perception of the risk.
So for that type of cancer that you can get from an infection, then the vaccine is a matter of preventing it. It's not a matter of you can cure it with vaccine after you have get it. So
Yeah.
it comes back to the like.
Exactly, it's the same that
prevention.
vaccine in the, the vaccine response of the people to vaccine in the COVID was the same because the people misunderstood somehow that some of them, that was misinformation that if you vaccinated, you will not be infected. But but it means that,
I think for HPV is quite, you might, like, it's not just about being infected, it's like,
Yeah.
in order to develop cancer long-term, like the level of it, like, it's just, it reduces a long way your probability of developing cancer, not to get infected, you might get infected at a certain
What
point.
about the infection-based the cancer that can come from the infection that is prevented?
okay, so 3 points, we.
I guess there, like,
There are no cancer which is contagious.
You mean that they can, if somebody infected and transmit to others, so why not? It can be,
You cannot get a cancer by an infection from another person that has already cancer.
no, but there are the vector borne, you mean that it's,
Like it's a virus,
yeah,
but
the
then it's like-
virus is
it's
transmitted to others and it could be resolved in the cancer long term.
not working.
Yeah, it's like a vector borne disease,
No,
but
it's not.
it's not? You know that? Oh,
I mean, it can come, I mean, you can develop some type of cancer if you have a certain infection, but there's like also, so there's probability of getting infected, and then if you get that infection, you could increase the probability of having certain type of cancer, but doesn't come as an as a vector-borne disease. It's no way. You
No,
can
I
get
mean
a
that
cancer from
in-
infection. Like it's.
no,
Most of the time, in this case, like, most of the sexual partner don't develop
Yeah.
cancer
Yeah, no,
themselves,
that's
it's like, it is like delayed of years and years.
But
And it's like, you
can be transmitted to other,
like,
through
not
the
this one,
sexual
not
areas.
this one.
I mean the virus that
Yeah.
can be transmitted and result in
Right.
cancer.
Cannot-
So exactly, I mean that, it's by vector borne, I mean that, like that,
like,
there is a,
possibility
the
of there's
transit.
no influence on
The
that.
possibility of even developing is not that high. That's what she
Yeah.
was telling.
Mhm, mhm.
It
Yeah.
can be, the virus can be transmitted,
Mhm.
but that.
But the probability is not
be
to be considered.
Yeah.
You mean that because it's a low probability to transmit it
But
from the
it's like
sexual.
lots of things, because it gets so late, like later on, it's not that you get the back, like, it's not like COVID that you get instant, it's not the response to the virus that
Mm.
drives the cancer, it's lots of
Yeah.
things.
Okay, so the most
And there's
important,
no and there's not developing the treatment side.
okay.
I don't-
So we can consider the prevention and model the prevention and the progression of the cancer in the society, like that framework. And then we can consider the government policy regarding the information publication and the response of the people to accept a lifestyle or something like that. Because also there are some studies that there are a positive correlation between the lifestyle and the probability of the cancer. So that's the.
A lot of papers on even like how obesity is related.
Obesity,
to
yeah,
cancer,
how you eat,
like,
how much
people
sport you do,
lifestyle.
all
Yeah.
that, everything influences.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
no, like,
Yes.
You can model the stress response.
Stress, yeah.
Once a provider tells you the bad news.
Yeah, the stress
like,
determines the
it-
level of the,
project,
exactly. Yeah.
that Yes.
Yeah.
but It's stress.
but then you
That was the
have-
next step that I wanted to explain, that how stress can determine the level of the risk perception. And the risk perception is a driving factor in the response to the treatment as well.
I think, like, if you think about stress and stress affected the
No,
treatment
you
outcome.
get better.
No. The stress means that how the
No, I
people are
understand, but
stressful.
But that will influence, like, your response to the treatment then.
Yeah.
Like, it's not gonna influence like whether you take the treatment or
It will
not.
influence directly.
The
the
biology, yeah,
Yeah,
that's my.
but the
my-
response to the treatment is in.
But this is a different situation
Mhm,
where it's a stress source
mhm,
that is major once a person gets a bad news,
mhm.
regardless
Yeah.
whether they go with a doctor or not. They're still stressed out.
Yeah. But that's a different type of modeling approach.
It's different from here because this kind of modeling is, as you say, it's population.
Yeah.
And you can put a huge question mark on the conclusions of this kind. Although it was perpetuated locally here during COVID,
I think, yeah, there's some
for
use
good
in terms of.
reason, because there was a big run. That's,
Yeah, it makes sense when you speak. That's why I
But-
said the cancer at the epidemiology level.
No, but my
Because-
idea was not to use the SIR model at this level. I
Of
wanted
course.
to use the progression cancer and treatment model. And as you mentioned that the treatment is modeled, how the treatment is decided, but to optimize, for example, my idea was to apply Markov decision process to in fact model the decision on the treatment and also the response of the people to the
but
treatment.
really, it's a nice modeling tool.
Yeah,
but
MDP can be for the
guilty
treatment.
person, how really? I have to believe.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your comments.
I guess something that would be really interesting if you can introduce also the economical side, so policy making, economical side, and then like trying to build something that is giving the government something to say like, oh yeah, this is a good policy to do. It's gonna be expensive to invest in prevention, but it's gonna have a huge impact on.
And also from the point of economics, you know, the people response to accept or to reject depends on how much does it cost them.
But that's just in the US and it's still like like, I don't think, I'm not talking about treatment, I'm talking about prevention.
Mhm.
I don't.
Yeah,
think
you're right.
treatment, Like, if you can't afford it, you just can't afford it, but then it's not like.
No, I mean the
Yeah.
cost benefit analysis that we
But
have
the
here.
doctor is gonna give you the best that they can give at a certain point, I
Within
think,
the
to try,
means.
yeah, without your being some needs.
Outside India, do you guys have a concept of generic medicine? Like, so there are pharma companies who
Oh, yeah, it's cheaper, the generic
yeah,
is cheaper,
So
yeah,
one
yeah,
thing
yeah.
which you can actually model is people's like the response towards choosing a generic medicine over a prescribed drug. So the thing- Yeah, they exist for certain treatments of cancer or
That
like
probably are the most
other,
widespread
yeah.
ones.
But the thing is, even when generic medicines are available, people tend to choose medicine which have the similar composition as by big pharma companies. Some people will make the decision to go for the big names or big brand companies and not choose generic medicine just because they feel,
Mhm.
just because it's cheaper, it might not work. So
Mhm.
those sort of modeling could, like, it's treatment, but like the choice between which ends the same composition,
Mhm.
I don't know if like it makes sense or not, but that's something that it needs.
Related to the economy, to the
Yeah,
economic
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
it's related to
Then
economy.
Decide if you want to choose, if you get a prescription, I mean,
Yeah,
it's like
so
a.
if you get a prescription,
Exactly.
you go to
You
the
can get
generic
it
medicine. Yeah, you go to the generic
Nowadays,
store.
like, it's unavailable, you can-
So also the prescription depends on the state of the cancer, is it?
And
So-
that depends whether your cancer as a
Yeah,
drug which
yeah.
has been,
Yeah.
which is
It's not about the
Probably
stage, it's more about
Mm.
Yeah, it's
cancer.
more
Yeah,
about
they are
the
not right
economical
cancer, yeah,
cost
exactly.
and decision-making
Mhm.
aspect of it. I
Mhm.
mean, that's something that just hit me, could be just actually.
But if we assume that the whole period that the treatment could be not only the I mean, the aggressive treatments from the medicines to aggressive. There is a wide range of the treatments if we consider them. And then can we assume that it could be a state contingent that depends on the level of the cancer and how there may be some providers, I mean the doctors, they prescribe aggressive intervention at the beginning to prevent any progress, but they say some of them postponed it in and say, okay, let's try this medicine and then wait for a while and then we will try the aggressive intervention. What's your idea about this? Can we?
Then the
This is-
doctor, we can have to the doctor, went to the doctor.
Yeah, exactly. I mean that how the doctors decide. Because it depends on the state. Yeah, exactly. You know, there is one point that everything depends on the state of the cancer. So if the set of information is important. So if we assume that we have a horizon of time, okay, then within this.
On updating
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and I mentioned that the treatment is not one time and one shot action. It's dynamic, and so
want your model to do?
I wanted to model that how the provider decides first, okay? The behavior of the provider is important.
Doctors, I mean,
It's
No,
like
no,
a
it is
molecular-
that actually but can we model it? You know, all modeling, when you, for example, the question, for example, you see that the prices go up, okay, when there is an increase in demand in market, okay? So, but you observe that the prices have gone up, okay? But how do you explain that? What is behind it? So the utilitarian comes to modeling that.
Video observable that you wanna then ask yourself, why is happening? Why is this happening? So what's the problem you wanna address? So what is?
Basically the decision, I mean that from the behavioral point of view, the decision on any treatment is not mechanical. I think that this is a human decision and there should be a mechanism to explain how the providers even decide.
But it's already standard of care. There are like set policies.
But the policies, how do you decide on the set of policies?
Because you're certified, for instance, I know for
Clinical
glioma.
trial.
For glioma, you have.
Is there any variation?
There are big
options,
ranges,
like,
like volume, tumor area that they can treat.
Exactly,
And
exactly.
they know, I think it's like. well
Thank you
well
for coming.
established and they're published and they have to follow the code. Yeah, it's already gone.
Okay, thank you, everybody. If
No, I was just saying, I mean, for cancer, doctor can't just do whatever he feels is better. So they have standards to follow at each stage, like dimension, certain level, I don't know, depending on the cancer, certain type of blood test they have to do, certain range they have to be into to decide which type of treatment they can use or not.
Mhm.
So it's not really like a human being.
Like
It's
online
more
classes.
But it is a decision. At the end of the moment, it's a decision. A standard, everything is standardized. Even in the economy, there is a set of policies available to the government, but the government decides. And they are economists, here the government policies, the measures, the measures that government in epidemiology can. Okay, thank you for coming.
Should we close the online thing?
Yeah.